Hello and welcome to the Kuyumungi Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robear, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. And on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, our volunteers, and supporting members, we do want to thank you for joining us today. The Kuyumungi Institute is an independent nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. Our focus is reflected in three main areas: experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of the deeper human connection to all of life. It's part of our mission to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that is available to us today. So, as an educational institution, we take an open approach, and we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration, and that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. And on these weekly discussions, there's probably 100 of them now up on YouTube, we've included a full spectrum of topics from the arts to the sciences and everything in between. And you're welcome to visit our website at kuyumungiinstitute.com. All of our presentations are free. And as a nonprofit, of course, we want to invite you to join our community circle, become a supporting member. And we want to thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Kuyumungi Institute. As part of our ongoing cultural appreciation series, today we have a special honor to welcome an elder from the Seneca Nation. We continue to educate, support, and respect the needs of restoring Indigenous life ways, embracing the ways of respecting the natural laws of Mother Earth, Father Sky, to live in peace with each other, and to ensure harmony with nature, that circle of life within all of creation. Our guest brings the wisdom of his tribe, sharing the power of language, song, art, and dance of the Seneca, their methods for healing, and how their culture and values remain strong and intact. In fact, our guest shares that the native archaeological perspective of the first peoples of the Americas and has created handcrafted reproductions of early Paleo-Indian tools of stones and mastodon bones as part of his work with archaeologists.
Well, we've talked so much about and around and through the Indigenous wisdom traditions. And for me, it's been at the heart of my quest, this core that I'm seeking, what is primal, what is sitting at the very essence universally for all of us. And to finally touch on that Indigenous core, to find those connections for myself and my worldview, my relations all around me. And perhaps that's why we hear our ancestors calling us back to that time, to carry their hard-won wisdom forward, to reclaim what we've lost and how we may be better equipped going forward to help make a better world. So it's personal for us. I think it's personal for many of us. And it is certainly personal for the Native Americans to go back in time and find deeper and deeper, longer and longer lineages. Mm-hmm. So it is with particular pleasure that we welcome Leon Sam Briggs. He says to call him Sam, all of his friends do. And we want to thank Richard Michael Gramley and James Herod for introducing us to Sam. And in sharing his story, we'll hear all about what it was like to grow up within a perspective far older than our current societies, his life journey on and off the reservation, his work with the healing arts, as cultural counselor and herbalist, and the gifts bestowed by working with beads and quills and leathers, traditional materials.
Right.
And I'm sure that this is Sam seeking to understand and explore and to honor the earliest of his ancestral lineage in recreating these early stone and bone tools. He'll show us the ladles he's made from mastodon bone. He'll recount stories of using them on a deer hunt quite successfully. And this is a universal quest, isn't it? To trace one's lineage back and back and back. And for Native Americans to read headlines such as, quote, a multidisciplinary team of scientists recently announced the discovery of the oldest human footprints in North America.
Mm.
These fossilized prints were made between 23,000 and 21,000 years ago along the shores of an ice age lake in New Mexico. That's in the center of our country.
Yeah, yeah.
In what is now the White Sands National Park, this finding fundamentally changes the timeline for human habitation in the Americas. That must be particularly resonant and meaningful. So Sam has been helping geologists and archaeologists looking at how early on his ancestors might have arrived on this continent far earlier than acknowledged, interpreting artifacts through the lens of his culture, something that scientists are now finally taking into account. Hey, let's ask the descendants of the artifacts what they may mean. That is a very welcome trend. Welcome, Sam. You have so much to share for us about your life story and then putting it into the far larger context. This is welcome wisdom for us all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Where are you? Where do you join us from? You're in quite the space filled with beautiful artifacts.
I'm in Pennsylvania today. I use a lot of times I split my time between Tonawanda Indian Reservation, my tribal property in northern Quebec up on the James Bay, and in Centerville, where my kids live. And so a lot of times on my regular schedule, I'm usually on the reservation Monday through Wednesday, Thursday, and then down here because on the Friday through Sunday, I work at the Fort LaBeouf Museum and in Waterford, Pennsylvania, doing a lot of reproductions, doing a lot of blacksmithing work. And it's one of the, one of the things that when I'm not doing a lot of traditional native perspective teaching, I'm teaching blacksmithing. I'm a world-renowned blacksmith. I've got pieces all over the world. I've had the honor and ability to work with some of the greatest blacksmiths in the world. I did a program, an apprenticeship and stuff with Benny Gents and from Denmark, and his family had been the smith to the Queen of England for over 170 years.
Oh my.
And when I was in Waterford, I had the benefit to work with an old Scotsman, George Abercrombie, and he was, he was, a bigger, brassy voice gentleman, and he played excellent music on bagpipes, and a lot of times at the end of the day, that's where the music came from. But I was born and raised in upstate New York. I was born off the reservation in an accident, but raised on the reservation. Then in the mid 70s, we moved back to Pennsylvania, to Waterford, and then I went to school there and graduated, and then shoeing horses and doing a lot of blacksmithing and doing a lot of traditional teaching. I've been lucky to be able to travel to New Zealand and Australia and other countries and stuff, to be part of some of these groups and stuff, and teaching a lot of the traditional crafts. A lot of the programs that I do at the museum, we end up getting people that come from other countries to the Fort LaBeouf Museum and to see some of the things that we've done. And as a historical reproduction specialist, I've been in quite a few different movies and documentaries, and I've had a lot of my recreations in there. One of the first ones that I was in was The Last of the Mohicans, and we were there, quote, as security for Russell Means, because I've been an A member since 1972. So there's not too many of us that are left, of that, basically of that old guard. A lot of the new people, they don't understand a lot of the things that we went through and we dealt with, especially like in the late 60s and stuff with the racism on and off the reservation, at the time of the Vietnam War. A lot of the white businessmen were trying to take away a lot of the politics and stuff that was going on with, the Vietnam War, and, trying to transpose it, to the indigenous people. which, caused a lot of issues and then eventually led to the, to a wounded knee, to the uprising.
I appreciate how you've been carrying your culture far and wide, and you come from a long lineage of that. Tell us about one of your ancestors, corn planter, and how he was a friend to George Washington. Talk about a long history.
And my lineage goes back even before that, because Gaius Suda, that's, he was one of and the Half King and Queen Aliquippa. They did a lot and structured a lot of what happened in the New World, especially within politics. Mm-hmm. Gaius Suda traveled with George Washington, and then Corn Planter traveled with George Washington, and we have a lot of issues and stuff with George Washington. And a lot of times being at the Fort LaBeouf Museum, which is, is the start of, the French and Indian War and everything that happened with George Washington. His politics of using the natives and stuff to help him out and help everything else out. But then, he turned on them, and all the things that the Corn Planter and stuff done. And then his half brother, Handsome Lake, the house that I grew up in on Tonawanda, Handsome Lake's mother and grandmother are buried in the front yard. Jesse Corn Planter was the last corn planter to live there, and then we grew up living there.
What was it like growing up with this really different perspective on one's history, on even the arts that you do? How did you?
Well, one of the things with growing up with me is my quote stepfathers, where Leon Briggs came from. He wasn't accepted there on Tonawanda, so when he came to visit my brothers and sisters, to me it was a benefit. And people were like, well, my mother sent me to a couple of different elders, and a lot of times I would go to Gadat's house and sit. And which to me was some of the best teaching, being able to sit with these elders and, and learning, the old ways, learning how to make baskets, how to do the carvings, how to do our false faces, make bows and arrows, and doing a lot of some of the more traditional arts, doing fired clay, doing baskets, making lacrosse sticks. I know you were talking about lacrosse, and
I was going to ask you about lacrosse, because it seems like so many kids of parents we know play lacrosse. It's a very popular game now, and it has Native origins, doesn't it?
Right. The story of the twins, and how they came to be. The good twin came to the earth through his mother, through the natural way as a womb birth, and then the opposite twin, he came through her stomach, and then she'd have passed. So that whole teachings and stuff, and they talk about these sticks. This is one that was made for me by Richard Mitchell's family up at Cornwall Island, and I've had this for a lot of years. I also have a Logan Special, which people that collect lacrosse sticks, they see a Logan Special, they start looking, trying to buy them. Some of those Logan Specials that have sold in the last few years have been $15,000-$20,000.
Goodness, wow! It's interesting.
This one here, this is a traditional made one. This one's over 200 years old.
Wow!
And that was what the original sticks were.
Interesting.
And then you've got that. And the balls were made out of root balls, and so those that's how a lot of the traditional games started. And in the traditional games, lacrosse is actually one of our medicine societies. It's not supposed to be played by women, and when we play in our medicine medicine games and stuff, a lot of time we play with our moccasins and our shorts.
Mhm.
Even in midwinters, it could be 20 below, and so we're still playing with our wooden sticks, you know, in our traditional, our traditional dress.
So when we talk about medicine games, that contains something more powerful than what we refer to in sports world. So what does that
Mere
mean?
game. Yeah.
What?
What is the cultural significance of the game?
The game has always been played, you know, for health of the people. The men always played for the strength and the well-being of the women and children. If somebody got sick, if somebody was ailing, or somebody was having, you know, mind problems, they could call for a medicine game, and then all the men would get together, and then, you know, whoever we're playing for, they'll give their vision, and they may say, well, you know, it's supposed to go this time, and so they make a traditional ball using clothes, different pieces from whoever's is doing that,
It's a
and
ritual.
then right, and so then it's used in that game. So a lot of times when you're going through and we're teaching about lacrosse, I mean, I've spoke at the University of Dayton, Ohio State, Dartmouth, a lot of these different universities and stuff, and said, you know, you need to go in there with respect. You know, we say Jago, and Jago is basically like Nike, you know, do it right, do it tough.
Yeah.
Well, Jago means do it good and do it in a good way. You know, play as hard as you can, but don't, you know, anytime we're playing lacrosse, here on the earth, there's always elders and people in the sky world that are playing with us. So it's that whole teaching and stuff of lacrosse and where it comes from. And I know some people have seen, you know, like the movie Crooked Arrow and stuff, and seen a lot of these others. You know, and I've sat and spoke, you know, with a lot of these college students, you know, talking to them about, you know, traditional lacrosse. And I know some of the college people, you know, talk about that in quote white society, in the college realm, there is 90% of the players, you know, that are playing are coming from, you know, basically like a white or public black background. But when you get into where they're running into the professional in lacrosse and even Olympics, 90% of the people that end up on those teams are Haudenosaunee players, people that come from our reserves. Because there's some, you know, the Thompson boys and stuff, and a lot of these guys, you know, and I had the benefit to meet Jim Brown. I remember, you know, him, you know, in the 60s and stuff, coming and playing before he was playing football.
So it's just a beautiful example of how a game is more than a game. It has a cosmic proportions and significance. And I appreciate that about the Indigenous perspective. Such a larger sphere in which to play, in which to do anything. And
so was there the lineage of the Seneca going all the way back, and how I know that you know, we're aware of the tremendous disrespect and things that have happened over the years in the past, and how if you've still been able to maintain the oral traditions and maintain the stories, maintain the ability to make your tools and do the things that you do. I mean, that story itself, tell us a little bit more about.
Well, like Tonawanda, we are the smallest of the 3 Seneca reserves, or territories, as we talk about it. We don't use the, but we are the only 100% sovereign nation left, that's on our original land. A lot of, you see people talking about sovereignty, and this nation and that nation, but the problem is we don't follow under the doctrine of discovery. We do not follow under the Articles of Incorporation, because we are still run by the clan mothers and a chieftain society. When after the Dawes Act and the reservation system and stuff was implemented, it was implemented to follow the Articles of Incorporation. And that old style of articles, the way it was designed, when a corporation fails, the government takes over. So you look at all of these reservations out west and around the country, 95% of them do not have, are not matriarchal. They do not have a chieftain society. They may have chiefs and clan mothers, but then they have an elected system.
I see.
We don't take any federal money or government money, for who we are. And so when we're doing what we need to be, that's the foundation of who we are.
You mentioned the clan mothers and the chiefdom system. How does that work? How is the power divided?
Well, the women own everything. In democracy is, it goes back, it's part of an Algonquin word, which means complete division. And a lot of times you see a lot of these government words and stuff that are used in archaeology, anthropology, even in a lot of the doctrines, and even in the Constitution. A lot of those words came back from words from the Algonquin people.
Yes.
And so when you're looking at those, we have a difference in ours is that, in the longhouse, we have two mortes. We have the birds and we have the animals. Everything runs through the woman's side. So any children born, they become, the mother's clan. Anytime we do a ceremony, we do funerals. I'm Hawk clan. So if somebody on the Wolf clan needs a ceremony and stuff, the Hawk clan or one of the birds animals would step over and do that ceremony and stuff for them. People look at it and they see our flags and stuff. They ask, why is there a deer on the bird side? And I said, watch a deer go through the woods. A lot of times a deer will run past you, just gliding through the woods, and people, they don't see them until they go past them.
Right.
And so in that morte system, in our clan system, we have faith keepers, and then we have our chiefs and our clan mothers. Our chiefs and clan mothers are all faith keepers first, and then they're put up as life lineage, in that position as a clan mother, or and it's all chosen by the women of that clan.
Well, their gender fluidity is really an issue for our society today. And I would like to get the Native perspective, because the Natives have dealt with this so respectfully and beautifully for so long. So what's the idea of the two spirits or the two hearts?
Two hearts are two spirited people. They in the longhouse, we talk about the covenant chain, and that covenant chain is represented by the Hiawatha flag or the Hiawatha belt. And in that, you see that standing, you have the Mohawk all the way to one side. You have the Seneca all the way to the other. Then you have the Cayuga, and then Oneida, and then you have the sacred tree, which is Onondaga. That's where the Great Fire is. So in that teaching and stuff of, the strength, in the abilities and stuff in the longhouse, we have, people that are born, that would have, ailments, Downs, autism, anything like that. And, and they're considered sacred. And a lot of it's the same with two hearts or two spirited people. They come into this world. They are given to us as a gift, as a balance in what we need. So a lot of times in a lot of the ceremonies and stuff, they're generally the only ones that can sit in both ceremonies. When we're doing some of our women's ceremonies and stuff, there's a number of us that sing, and 10 fire and stuff for them. But they come to us, they ask us, to come and do this for them. So, but a lot of times, with the two-spirited people, in many of the indigenous, communities, they're all kept protected. And a lot of times when you have people in medicine societies, they would actually have them, there to assist when they're doing different ceremonies. I know when I was in Australia, back in the early 2000s, well, no, before that, and we were able to go to in the outback and talk with a lot of these traditional elders and stuff, and a lot of them had the same outlook and stuff that we did.
Yes.
When we talk and stuff, we tell people and stuff, when we do decolonization, is to learn your language and speak in your language first, and then English second. So anytime we go to the White House or anything that's non-traditional, we always speak Seneca first and then translate it. And a lot of times when you're with that and you're working within academia, there's a lot of words that will not translate, into academia. And so even some of the words and stuff that they have for two-spirited people, it's like you'll be talking and it's like it's broken up. I see, it's like people that have problems with their hearing aids. They're only getting part of that sentence. So I said, you need to step down. You need to use common language in order, just because there is a word that was created in academia doesn't mean that it can be translated, into another language.
Or that it's accurately containing the meaning in the indigenous.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also just follow, just for a side note of what you just touched on, when you talked about the Aboriginal people of Australia. Laura and I also had the great privilege of spending time in the outback and meeting with some Aboriginal people. And one of the things, we were storytelling, and they asked us where we were from. And at the time we lived up in the northwest part of the United States. And he said, I just had a time with some Salish people. They came and I did ceremony for them. And when I finished my ceremony, they all started crying. And he said, what are you crying? He says, our rituals, our ceremonies. It's the same ceremonies. It's the same adaptation and understanding. And you just touched on that as well, is that when you saw that interconnectedness of those people that take the Aboriginal view, it's a worldwide thing without conversation. It's there within them.
It's beautiful how much.
Right. And a lot of it, in those languages, when you're speaking the creator's language, the creator gave it to us in our heart to understand in our mind, the unification of life, and a lot of times, a friend of mine just asked me the other day, he says, one lady was telling her that I was a horse whisperer, and that because I've worked with Mustangs and stuff for the BLM for most of 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And how we worked with them and the things that we did. And I said, well, a lot of it is, it's not a verbal spoken language. I said, it's using your heart to connect your mind with their mind and letting them hook onto you to figure out, and they already know everything. And you just need to get them to explain to them how you want them to do it.
Wow. So even interspecies communication is, we even worked with a Mayan elder, Hunbat's men, who wanted us to go to the Salish and look at shared words and then on to Mongolia. He felt there was a language connection as well. It's one of the ways to trace this. In the healing arts, what you're talking about is very healing. Explain healing and your work, healer. Even your own native name means something to do with healing. How is that translated?
Hoya de Gejas means he helps always. And that's considered when you're born, traditionally, when we're born, you don't have a name for that first year because the creator's still molding you. They're still taking and giving you that. And so the clan mothers and the faith keepers, they watch that child and they see the things that they do. And then at the strawberry dance the next year, then they're given their name. So you could have an infant's name and then in your teens and that get another name, and then get an elder's name. Hoya de Gejas, means he helps always. And my clan said, she says, when they sat down with me with our chief and stuff, and one of the things she says, she says, not once have we ever had to ask you, to do things twice. And she says, and most of the time you had it done before we asked you.
Mhm.
And she says, that's why. And then, at different times, I've gone to other places to speak, and going in a good way, without showing, like vengeance or anything like that, is what we're supposed to do. And so a lot of times I was asked to, to go and speak with people to, to get them to, to get them to learn to walk in beauty, walk in that balance.
Mm.
You were part of a film that you mentioned autism, an autistic gentleman, Adrian Esposito, made, where he, inner healing journey with native trees of knowledge. You were one of the many elders that he sought some insight and healing advice from. What did you have to share with him on his journey?
Adrian was, he had first come to me. He had gone to different places. He had gone to a lot of different doctors and physicians, psychologists, and he was like, every time he turned around, so they were giving him different medicine and more medicine, and he said he'd have fits of rage and everything. And when his mother came and we sat and talked, and I started relating to him, about a lot of our traditional stories.
Mm-hmm.
And Adrian had another, he has been well documented, filmmaker and writer, and he wrote a movie called Bury My Heart with Tonawanda, about a young gentleman with Downs being accepted into the tribe and the nation and stuff, and then actually dying and asked to be buried there.
Wow.
So when I started working with Adrian, one of the things that we did was working on how to balance his spirituality, how to get him to figure out. And by doing that, he got to go in and speak. His mother did a lot of interviews over the years, and Rolling Thunder, who was a very unique gentleman, and he had a lot of presence in mind to kind of help form people. And at that time with him and Black Elk and some of the other elders, a lot of times, you see a lot of these books and stuff coming out and teaching. And well, Adrian said, he got to sit and he was listening to those reel-to-reel tapes and listening to the Rolling Thunder talk. And so in that journey, he asked about, and I said, about his teaching. So I started helping him and started working with him. And he proposed the question about, do you think this could help us? I said, yeah. I said, I'm 100% sure that it will fix and help you. Well, through this whole, I think it was almost 8 years of going back and forth and doing, and he got to do an interview of different elders and people from around the country. And then, he found that where he found his place. He found found his beauty, walking in beauty. And now, he's a director. He does these movies. He teaches. He goes to universities and does talks. He's got a car. He drives. And then he works within society. And he's a very big advocate for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
Robert Redford came to him and told him that he looked at his movies and things that he did, says that that's some of the most unique work that he's ever seen
Wow,
on a native profile, but non-native.
I see.
Mhm.
Oh,
And so,
accepting who you are, such powerful medicine as well.
right.
Mhm. Wow.
And so I've actually used that video in a number of, it's been featured on PBS, and he wanted Red Earth, a number of these different places overseas and stuff. He wanted a lot of these big film festivals.
sure.
And so when he was going through and learning, that's one of the things. Every once in a while I call him, we'll just sit and talk, and he just, like he says, it's gets to find his balance.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And is that part of the healing that you work with as a counselor with various trauma centers and families?
Right. Yeah, I do. I work a lot in prisons. I was going to Allenwood prison and stuff here in Pennsylvania, working with, helping with Leonard Peltier and stuff, until the government found out that I was an A member. So after 4 years, he said, "Oh, you can't come back here." Yeah. So I said, "Well, okay." But going into a lot of the different institutions and stuff, I do a lot of programs, and I'll take a lot of my furs and some of my different artifacts and to some of these different groups where they have people on the autism spectrum, people with Downs, people that are confined to wheelchairs. I mean, I've got a red fox that I've passed around so many times, and it's like, I said, no, that's why they're here. I said, it's nothing. But for a lot of times, taking some of those people, I had one gentleman that had really severe with Downs, and he was in a wheelchair, and I took a bear hide and I wrapped it around him, and I put the paws up on his hands, and it's actually the one that's right here behind me.
Oh, good. Let's see some artifacts. Can we see?
And so I put that over his shoulders and stuff, and the lady was so amazed because he didn't move his arms, but as soon as I put those paws over his hand, he was able to pick his hands up, and he was going like moving his arms and stuff around. And she was telling this to his therapist, and then telling it to his doctor and stuff. And the doctors, well, he's 50 some years old and he's never done that, so it's not possible. They said it was probably just a muscle reflex. So he goes into his next appointment and stuff, and he reaches his hand out to shake hands with his doctor, and his doctor just kind of looked at him like, "Oh, I guess he is regaining function."
It must be frustrating for Western society to deny the healing arts and what you bring. But go ahead, Paul.
No, I was just going to add to that. Interesting. I really appreciate the fact that you're bringing up this aspect of healing and reaching out to the world around that needs to be healed. We had the great pleasure of many conversations, and actually had him at our home. Vine Deloria Jr., who was the native scholar and author of God is Red, and he said, there was a lot of concern, of course, within the Native community that you're going to just co-opt and take our traditions and our understandings. But when these elders come to me and say, you're telling too much, he says, on the other hand, what are they going to do on their own? Where's Western?
We're so lost and broken.
Yeah, where's the Western people taking us? If we don't step up and offer some medicine, where are they going to go? And so you're one of those shining lights within the Native world that is saying, hey, I'm going to reach out there and I'm going to find ways
help us
to help direct things and have healing happening.
And a lot of it, going back into the 60s and stuff, one of the first things I do when I'm doing a program is I do land acknowledgement. One of the second things I do is I thank my parents and my grandparents because South Byers, were the boarding school.
Right.
And growing up in that system and seeing things that happen, my mother moved us away from the reservation to keep us from, falling into that system. And I've dealt for years with a lot of people from those from the boarding schools and those systems. And so a lot of times when I'm doing ceremonies and healings and stuff for them, it comes from a completely different standpoint, because it doesn't come from a medical. We're coming from holistic.
Right.
Something we sorely need.
Absolutely.
Can we see some of the artifacts? You say that these are what cultural containers. They have a certain power. They wake up something inside of us.
Yeah.
Can you show us some of your artifacts, please?
We were talking about, this. I got some pretty good sized pieces of ivory, mastodon and mammoth ivory and stuff. Every once in a while, I get pieces that are big enough that I can use, to make knife handles and stuff. And so when I get these pieces and they come from different areas, I don't sell anything that I make with those, because to me, that's a medicine that's coming from, that seventh generation. And it's one of the things that we teach when we talk about the seventh generations, is it affects everything that we do, from how we create, our daily life, how do we create our art, or even how we are. Because traditionally, when we talk about the seven generations, they say, well, the Catholic Church about 15 years ago figured it was a generation was 32 and a half years. So if somebody was being punished for 7 generations, it's 7 times 32 and a half. Well, we don't believe that. We believe that that 7th generation is carried in the womb of the youngest female on this earth.
Oh, wow.
And so when we're looking at a lot of these artifacts and a lot of these pieces, we're looking at, at the creation. We're looking at parts of the creation story. We're looking at, we let the pieces tell, and this is one.
Let the pieces talk. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is,
beautiful.
this is a piece of Flint Ridge, and that is natural. That is the color and stuff that it comes from. But you look at, we talk about that being the heart of the thunderbolt, coming from the heart.
Oh, it looks like a heart.
Yeah. And here's another one. This knife is almost 200 years old, and it's been repaired. It was given to me. This is what's called a beaver tail. Then
like a
we did a case up for it, and that's all porcupine quill.
Oh boy.
So using a lot of, our traditional teachings and their traditional way of life, a lot of these artifacts and stuff that we do, we look at how things have developed and how things have been documented. The nice thing about dealing with people like Jim Herrick, dealing with Mike Gramley, dealing with some of these guys that are not stuck in a book, and you look at, like when I go to a lot of these different dig sites, I don't dig, I look at things, I look at, and at these different pieces, and how they were made, and looking
how they
at
were
the bones.
ritually used as well.
Right. And I know, when I was down to Blue Licks with Mike Gramley, we got to look at these tusks and stuff. We got to look at some of these bones and seeing the human interaction with them. This last year when we were down there, we had one find there, and so we're sitting at lunchtime and we're sitting there talking, and it was part of the outside of a tooth. Well, here we found out, after Dennis had some tests and did other things, that this is only the second time this has ever happened, was to find a woolly mammoth tooth in the kill site, where the mastodons and stuff were.
Wow.
So that's, and fortunately or unfortunately, both sites were Mike Gramley's sites.
Mhm.
And so when we get to talking, a lot of times, like Mike will call me, I found this on, and he's always going through books and he'll find stuff. And way back in the shirt tail of the Q Johnson Hall, we have some relation together, where Mike's family actually came from the Johnson family and the Mohawks. But this is another piece here. This is made from an elkhorn that came from Elkhorn Butte, but it has a metal blade and stuff in it. I've actually used this for when I'm scraping, and it's got a tiller and stuff for it made, to fit your hands while you're working. I use that for buffalo hide.
Wow.
This is a female buffalo leg bone, which actually is going to be cut off on an angle to use, as a hide scraper. It just like the metal one and stuff was, but this is traditional. This one actually came from a washout site in down south, where they were just washed out of the bank.
Is it as effective as a metal tool?
What's that?
Is it as effective at scraping a hide as a metal tool? You can retouch
yes,
it.
it's just as effective. Just the metal, just kind of you don't have to stop and sharpen it as much. Where this will wear down a lot faster. Once they've started using the metal tools, they took in they weren't wasting or wearing out a lot of the bone tools and the flint tools.
Wow.
And and this is another one, and this one actually comes from up in northern Quebec. This is one that I made. It's hafted with another blade on it. But this bone actually comes from a wolf that was the carcass of stuff was laying along the river. And so then, this is all traditionally got hafted. And so I use that for doing a lot of my hides. And there's a lot of other people, when you see a lot of this reproduction work, and some of the things that we're doing, Ryan Gill from Florida, he has a company called Hunt Primitive, and Ryan actually worked with some archaeologists and anthropologists and stuff, and he's done the only video start to finish buffalo hunt with a traditional atlatl.
Wow.
And they made the points, they made the atlatls, and I tell people, get on and watch the video on YouTube. And a lot of the archaeologists and the anthropologists and the people there that were going through, some of them, have never been around anything like that, but to see how these things work and how they were documented. And then they went through and they measured the blades and seen how many times they had to be resharpened. One of the newest ones is Stephen Renault that has Meat Eater. They harvested a buffalo, and then they proceeded to break down the entire buffalo, bones and everything, using stone tool.
Wow. I have to say that in France, an archaeological park that recreated a lot of the Ice Age artifacts around Les Izzy, where we saw the painted caves, we got to throw an atlatl. And they had an instructor that said, okay, here's how you hold it. Here's how you throw it. There's the bale of hay. There's your target. I was able to do it better than you. So accurately and so far. And it was so thrilling to hold this tool. It worked so brilliantly. And so it really made me applaud our early ancestors and how finely tuned and crafted and knowledgeable they were. Given the materials they had to work with, they accomplished a lot. It was just exciting how much power. You could go into the physics and go, well, the leverage and the this and the principle. They knew none of that. They just experimented with it. They paid attention. They knew their tools. They knew their materials. They knew how to make the most of it. It was thrilling So yeah, I'm going to watch that video. That is exciting.
And one of the unique things about that documentation and stuff, and Ryan's working on doing another one, and he's written a book on it. But when you look at like some of these simply made at-lateral throwers,
Oh wow.
and this is gut hafted, and and then we have.
And there's a certain way, just the ease, the natural inclination
see,
of how you want
like
to
this
throw
one
works
here,
with it. Yeah.
This is one that I used, and unfortunately, it made it to 2 pieces. But I took a doe with this one, but you see a lot of these. In one
You
of the
actually
things,
used that, and you brought down a doe. Oh my gosh.
yeah. But
Wow.
you look at this, and there's a number of guys, and when you watch Ryan's video, he talks about the 2 feathers versus the 3 feathers. So when you have, you got some of these 2 feathers, and this one's actually, I have 2 of these that were made by Ryan Gill, and these are made out of cane. Then we have some of the 3 feather ones.
Oh boy. Wow.
And then these are made, I have ones that are made of ash and ones that are made of hickory.
Yeah.
And then these are European style ones.
You
You see the differences up in the hafting, and these are all basically about 6 foot 6 long.
Yeah.
And feathers are quite an ingenious nature-made aerodynamic feature for birds. And even scientists are looking at how owl feathers and how they're so stealthy and they can have so much balance to grab a mouse. How if you want to click us on, I'm demonstrating something, how owl feathers tip up at the ends. And so that's why you see plane wings now with tip ups at the end to imitate the feathers. And so to use feathers, whether it's a single feather or 2 feathers or 3 feathers, must change the aerodynamics of the way that this piece goes through the air. Because feathers are so brilliantly, dynamically created by nature for the birds.
Yeah.
We looked.
When
I
I
mean,
was
these
in,
are. Go ahead.
When I was in New Zealand, I got to see an atlatl that a Maori gentleman had made, and he was talking about the history and stuff. And when that one was made, one feather was stripped all the way down, and it was wrapped all the way around. So it was one feather that was attached at the top and then down.
Oh, that would change the dynamics. We actually met the gentleman from Boeing who got the Boeing engineers retired together. We went to a cocktail party for them. They were celebrating, they debuted that several years ago. And they were celebrating how they tried to go to Boeing, he said, and say, hey, if you do this at the ends of the planes, they'll be more stable. Because we're looking at birds who have these wings. And they got ignored. And so he waited until the Boeing engineers retired who were making this discovery, and then he created a whole company, and now the pains are red.
$1 billion.
Listen to nature, biomimicry. Let's look at nature. Let's listen to nature, which is what indigenous people have been doing. These are power tools. We've also talked with surgeons about how obsidian blades can create finer points napped correctly to do surgery and cut, they said, between the cells, not slice cells open. So they were respecting the indigenous tools made from napped obsidian cutting tools. It's like, oh my gosh.
And when I'm doing a lot of this reproduction work, like I've got 2 more elephant ribs coming. And we're actually going to film using all stone tools to split that elephant rib to make, to make one of the old style atlatls. One of the things in a number of these different sites that I've seen and talked to Mike Gramley and some of these different archeologists and stuff is seeing that Mike was one of the few, or probably one of the first, that actually recognized that these bone piles that they're finding were actually broken atlatl throwers.
Yeah. Ritually broken, intentionally broken.
Right.
Can you explain the tradition for that? Why would that?
A lot of it is
the ritual?
Now in Pennsylvania, the only the most complete mastodon was found in a lake here, and the only thing they didn't find was the top of the skull cap. Everything else was there, but it showed all of the marks and everything from it. But it showed human interaction, that where the Achilles tendon was actually cut.
Mm-hmm.
And 90% of the animals, horses, elephants, reverse is not an option. That has to be taught to them.
For them to step backwards is not natural for them.
Right. It's like a horse. A horse to go backwards has to be taught to them.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Right. And so when a horse goes to turn and they want to go backwards, it's always a forward motion.
Turns around
before they turn.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of what was happening and stuff, is they were actually cutting the Achilles tendon, and then
to hunt them, to disable them, to render them to Mike explained that when he was here with us. And Mike's in the audience, and so is James Harrod. So we need to bring them on at some point.
We'll have some questions and comments. Yeah.
Here's another piece that I made when I'm doing a lot of these reproductions. This is a piece of moose antler, and it's got a hole in it. And that's a flint drill.
Okay.
And this is a buffalo rib bone. And this is actually, if you look at it, that's a bow drill.
Yeah.
Got it. And leverage on there, a little power. Yeah.
That's the stone I drilled with that.
Oh,
wow. Oh, that's
and
exciting.
So showing this would be considered a net weight, and I'm actually building a net, building the weights and everything for dioramics for a museum, to show how these nets and stuff were made. And one of the gentlemen at the museum and stuff, he says, well, we never had any water around here where they're at. And I said, the nets that were used for fishing were also used for birds and small animals.
Oh, like bolos, like throw the nets and then
no, they were set on trails, and they would chase an animal through it, and they would get caught up in the net.
But the nets needed weights, and so you needed to tie the stones through the hole to make the net more effective.
Right, because when they would hit that, it would flip over, and then those stones would actually cause it to roll up.
Yeah.
And then showing how this stuff is being reproduced, taking the dog vein, breaking the dog vein down, and then making the rope and the cordage and stuff to make, and then making the bow drill, making the stone weights and stuff, doing it all by hand. And I see a lot of these guys, and they're like, well, they talk about a lot of these pieces that are used, and you see a lot of this reproduction stuff. But like I said, you got people like Ryan Gill, you got some of these other gentlemen around that are using a lot of these tools, and using what we would call either paleo, but like Ryan talks about using what they call using abo tools. When I was in Australia, I was asking one of the elders, do you guys have a problem with when people use the term abo? And he says, no. He says, because it gives us the credit for making those. Well, you get a lot of the
give credit where credit is due.
Yeah. Right. So a lot of the new age people and stuff, we're not going to use Aboriginal. We're not going to use abo, because, those are the things in the way,
I think it's a mark of honor now.
Right. And so when you're looking at a lot of these pieces, just to sit there and to handle them, to study them, and, to see, and then you just kind of smile because, wow, I know how they made that mark. I know how they did this. And
how
like
beautiful
I said,
they are.
You've got some of these anthropologists and archaeologists and stuff that are actually taking this step, to go beyond, like some of their religious beliefs and stuff, to find what the truth is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And there's so many times that a lot of these artifacts, have sat in so many different places for, for years. And that was one of the things that Mike, and I've heard him talk about it many times, going into some of these places, and people didn't, they just got everything thrown in a box and they didn't realize what they had.
Or they weren't asking the native elders, do you recognize this? How is this used? I want to just mention one thing about holes. Here's my picture of a tool. I think they're called batons that we saw in France in the museums from the Ice
Yep.
Age. And then I was reading and they're like, wow, what is that used for? Then I was reading about cordage and how far back twisted cordage, whether it's plant fibers or long sinews or strips of leather goes.
Yeah.
And you have to twist them together. And so now there's a theory that each hole, I don't know how many holes, maybe just 3 holes, I don't know, but each hole would have a thread. And then you just turn this around and you twist it.
I see.
And how quickly, because think of the amount of cordage that was used.
Right.
They've even found cordage going way, way, way back, or the imprint of cordage on clay or mud,
Mhm.
and in its particular twisted fiber imprint. And so how far back this goes, I'm like, how clever. How else would you do it? Get 3 or 4 people and, spin it. But this is such a simple tool to spin cordage.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
This was actually found at a site, and the archaeologist gave it to me.
Wow.
It was in a bag, and the vine cordage and stuff that was in there was actually running right through the holes.
Yes,
Ah.
yeah.
So whoever it was at that time
And then just turn
had
it around.
already twined the cordage, but
Yeah.
was starting to wrap it, and to make a heavier rope out of it.
And more expertly twisted, right? Because it's
Right.
an easier motion on to manufacture, goes more quickly. So what a simple tool, and how
Yep.
brilliant.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, and I'm sure modern machines are doing the same thing. This was just the nature's version of it.
I think there's
So,
there's an
wow.
element to the story too, as you share this, Sam, and that is that in what's become Western culture, we've separated out spirituality from everyday functions. We don't see the two things interconnected, and yet when we look at it from the native perspective, the sacred is involved in everything, whether it's making cordage, whether it's hunting a deer, whether it's every tool has a
Or
voice.
making the tools and having the lineage of the ancient tool blessed into the new tool ritually.
Right.
Goodman did that.
Right.
She would make a rattle. You take the old stones from the ants, put some of them in, do a ritual, and now that power is transferred to the new tool. I think that's similar. What Gramley was talking about, what you've been talking about, ritually broken tools at these sites.
Ritually initiated tools. Every tool has a voice. It has a personality, and it seems like there's a relationship there. And that relationship means that it's not about just purely just the function of it. It's about that it's a companion as we go forth, right?
It has it has
respected.
agency. It's activated. It has life.
There's a respect.
It's
there.
power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So
And a lot of times, like I said, when you look at those pieces, and how things that were designed, I've taken, took a piece of tusk and I put a hole here, but this is a flint striker, but it's also the base and stuff I use for my fire bow.
I see.
what's a fire bow? What do you mean by that?
Using just like using the bow for the bow drill, you're using a bow for making running it. Instead of using your hands to run the drill down, you're using the bow.
Yeah.
Right. So much tension comes on that it lights a spark.
Right.
Right.
So much, yeah, the speed of that. And then you've got a little piece of lichen or something to start a fire.
Yeah.
Fire bow.
Well, I'm going to
Wow.
invite Richard Gramley to make a comment at this point,
And James.
and James, and anyone else. I know we also have who you probably have not met, but Lauren Olson is in the audience as well. And Lauren, oh, he just stepped off. Shucks, but Lauren
He'll come back.
he did amazing research in the Northwest about recovering original
Oh, we want
songs
to
and
hear that
traditions.
story.
Yeah. So
And artifacts
Yeah.
in the Pacific
Okay.
Northwest.
well,
Yeah.
let's Professor Gramley or whatever we want, Dr. Gramley or just Richard.
We
Let's
just
have-
call him Gramley. Such a unique name.
Hello, Gramley.
Yeah.
Oops, I got the wrong one. Here it is. There we go.
And
Yeah.
James Herrick.
Yeah. Okay.
James started this whole thing off, this
Yeah.
whole connection.
For us, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can have James too. Gramley, turning on your mic. I'll get James on as well.
Do you want me to comment?
Yeah.
Well, I have to say that the one thing I'm interested in proboscideans.
You've got to
I
put your
don't-
camera down so we see your whole face. Thank you.
Okay.
Much better.
yes,
Very good.
I'm interested in proboscideans, and
Elephants. Yeah.
I'm focused. Trunk animals.
Mastodons, mammoths. Let's just
animals.
define it for our lay audience.
All trunked animals. And I did have, it all began for me when I found the Bowser Road site in the Hudson Valley, where I just was a day or two ago. I drove right by the place where we unearthed that proboscidean, but it had been killed ritually. And the only things that were on that skeleton, what was left of the skeleton, were artifacts made of proboscidean bone and ivory from a previously killed animal. So it was clear to me that the people, they didn't deposit, or it wasn't correct to deposit anything upon the skeleton of a proboscidean they had killed except other proboscidean pieces. There were no deer antlers. There was just nothing of that nature left behind. So they had a very special regard for the proboscidean. It was if you will, a religious orientation. And it was very profound, and it pervaded their lives. When people came to die, they made hearses from sleds made from proboscidean tusks and limbs, and they were not probably normal everyday sleds. They were sacred sleds. So the symbolism or the beauty of the animal was taken to heart. It was part and parcel of the mainstream of their beliefs and culture. It gave meaning to their lives, and they did not dishonor the animal, even though they killed it periodically. But they had no perspective, I'm sure, on how many, what the populations of the proboscideans were, and eventually we had so many people that we ended up killing all the proboscideans. It wasn't by design. It was probably accidental, but it was, it
Can we
happened.
ask Sam about this? Let's ask Sam. Does this make sense within your cultural tradition?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us how.
Well, even like you were talking about the rattle, you know, we like anthills, and you get to digging in anthills, we find those little stones, and we put those in
Yeah.
traditional rattles. So
Yeah.
a lot of times, if they were doing a ceremony, and we had a few that we did, and if you looked at how the rattles were made, they always had a pin in the end.
Yeah.
The reason that pin was in the end was to take it apart, and then
Mm-hmm.
they wouldn't take all of those
Rattle.
white beads out. They would take part of them out, then they put it back in, and they would leave it. Then they would take those, and those were carried on and added the seed to the next rattle that they made.
And it's a perfect community of stones. It's like our lineage, the elders and the children, right?
Yep.
Get initialized, carry through the tradition. And you're doing it, all of life is sacred. So even these stones would carry on as our communities do. I mean, to me, it just makes so much sense. Paul, do you want to show Paul does these.
Well,
This
no,
was
but-
yeah.
So, so when you get the pin, like you say, it can be removed. We can
Yeah.
add
Ritually
stones.
add new
Right,
stones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
that's
And how beautiful for Mother Earth using the ant people to come up and bring up these very stones that work so beautifully in this.
Yeah.
It's
Right,
such
and-
delightful tradition. So that's our small part that we were taught by the founder of this institute.
right.
Yeah.
Well, what is unique about that is when I was in New Zealand, they did the same thing. When I was in Australia, they were doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
you basic, and it's like, well, they didn't have YouTube.
No,
Thank you.
They didn't have Mike Grambley's book there to read,
no.
unless it was made out of hair and fiber written. With a lot of these things that you see all over the world,
Mhm.
we were up one time when I was in Alaska, we were up Inuit, and there was an area there where they were processing some of the buffalo and stuff that they were finding there. And one of the things that they found, they were finding bows and arrows, spears, stuff like that were, when this stuff started melting away, laying right on top of them.
Oh,
I see.
oh, wow. Even so, buffalo. So with every major honored species, those tools, they had a ritual protocol for those.
Right.
You're
Sometimes
saying
it's very
similar.
difficult, almost impossible to recognize the rituality, if you will,
Right.
of why artifacts are left at sites or some are taken away. But
Excellent point.
I mean, it takes but if you begin to understand the nature of the man's relationship to proboscideans, you will realize that this was terribly important to leave everything behind after a proboscidean was killed, and leave everything associated with the previous kills on the site where the animal was processed, and not to take anything from the previous kills away. And that explains why we have these perfectly usable handles made of proboscidean rib that are still excellent and could be used. And they're left behind, not broken, not damaged, but
Mhm.
they relate to a belief system that is so strong, it's so cultured, it's so rich, that they have to just clean house and divest themselves of all of that material from before they go away, leave the site, and take the new pieces of bone, antler, and ivory, or ivory rather, to make into new things, to
Yeah.
kill the next animal.
I
And
want to say something about how mammoths were honored that we learned from a guide at Bernafal Cave in France, just outside Les Izzy. So we saw a lot of caves, but Bernafal was very special. And our guide there was Marie-Christine Girard, who we've been corresponding with since. And she said, and she pointed out as she gave us a tour of this small cave, privately owned, that the mammoth symbol up in the main chamber at the very end, here was the mammoth taking center spot, the highest part of the cave, the center of this round part of the cave, and so honored there. And she said it was the portal to the cosmos. This was the portal to the ancestors. This was the portal to the sky, in her opinion. And we saw so many mammoths created on many cave walls that just the dripping of the cave, the water through the cave, the ropes, the crystalline ropes would make, and they would just add an eye and maybe a little bit of that particular bump on the head, that profile that was so distinctive, and how mammoths were honored throughout. So they were such a dominant presence for this culture. You could see through their art. So I just want to say, I mean, how could it not be the tallest, the biggest, the most powerful of the fauna that you shared the environment with? How could it not be anything but top of the line, most sacred?
Yeah.
Right. And so interesting. And yet they weren't depicted so much in the cave paintings. They were depicted in other ways.
Yeah.
So
like with that,
just wanted to add that, her insight, Marie's insight.
Mike sent me some stuff here a while back. We were talking about this chief's name, and that, about coming up, we were talking about and listening to it, and it starts talking about dragging the horns.
yes,
Oh,
yes. And that's like, and this was that first sachem in that order.
right.
The
The Bear
tusk,
Clan,
the
the
horn.
Mohawk.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
And it had such a profound, our relationships to Proboscideans were so profound that they, even these 12 and 13,000 years later, since their disappearance, the symbolism, the reference to these animals still is with us. It's with the stories of the Seneca, and that it's with the terminology of the Mohawk. I mean, it had a profound effect upon a people. And it's just amazing, and it continues to the modern day.
And can we interpret these sites in any other way but through the cultural context? I have another question for you, Sam. Just let me ask this. So the burial practices, we're talking about the burial of a mammoth that was taken down, or a mastodon. And James, when you were with us in your brilliant talk, you talked about the burial practice of a small child and how it was buried along a common pathway, right? So that the soul of the child would still be with the community. The soul of the child lost would still be there in communion with the community on this well-traveled path. And I wanted to ask you, Sam, about burial practices that you know of, that the Seneca practice. Does that make sense in the context of your culture? Is that an idea carried through?
And there's places through New York that there's a lot of these, these cuts or crevasses and stuff where they've found burial remains just wrapped in shrouds and set at the bottom. Because in other places along roads and along paths, it's like when we were talking about, just like harvesting an animal and stuff, the everything that's made for the funeral for a human, when we make the corn soup and we make all that, all of those pieces, everything that's made for that is put in the fire. Everything has to be all returned to the earth.
Right.
And so when
sent up to the heavens through the smoke. Yeah.
Right. And so when we talk about, lifting our prayers up, that's the last thing that we do is add that to it. Like I said, a lot of times, like with buffalo and stuff, some of the sacred buffalo and stuff that were taken for ceremonies, that top cap was taken off and it was actually used, as like as a smudge pot, as a thing. And I know the mastodon, that most complete one that was ever found in Lake Pleasant, that's the only piece that was missing, was that top. And I would say that's what they were doing is they had removed that, to do for the ceremonies and stuff for the next.
Wow.
Makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Let's bring James into the conversation. We put you up on screen here, but we had such a fascinating and interesting conversation, and you've kind of been the one that's been connecting the dots for us, and how we've been able to meet Gramley and also with Sam today. So
I'm learning. I'm listening and learning.
Yeah.
And the values that Sam has talked about today, our whole civilization can use those values.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a lot to learn.
You mentioned also sites that the topography looked like a mastodon, that looked like a mammoth. And so there was a sacred space. You cited a site like that. The landform itself suggested this creature. And Sam, that would be a sacred place, wouldn't it? Your people would see that and go, nature is showing us, here's the energy. Here's the power of this animal. We
have Tyler Chase. When we were up at the Hitchcock site, and me and Mike and Tyler were up there, we were doing, Tyler took her drone and went up, and she got a drone shot from about 400 feet straight down. And you can see where that center really deep spot is, but the whole outlook of the thing, it looks like a mastodon.
Yeah.
And I think it's particularly special when nature herself offers it through. The spirit is coming through the land. The spirit's coming through the cave wall. The spirit is reaching out to meet us I mean, that has got
But it's
to
our
be so
recognition,
special.
that pattern recognition within ourselves that sees also.
Yeah,
Yeah, and sometimes, like you said, a small manipulation by humans just to add that extra additional eye
Yeah.
or whatever that needs to be done.
or
to-
when Thomas Wynne was showing us some of the very old half million year old
hand
flints
axes.
and hand axes. Yeah. And here, of course, we would recognize that in a
Mhm.
small object, like you
Sure.
did with a thunderbolt on the point.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, be it
Yeah.
large or small,
Yeah.
it's speaking to us.
Yeah.
So, James, what else do you want to add here about symbols and iconography?
The site that I had mentioned was the Anzac site in Montana.
Right.
At that site, actually the archaeologist Larry Lauren, who worked on the site, told me that the shape of the entire hillside, it's like a little plateau that comes up, probably left by a glacier. I'm not a geologist, so I don't know. I went on Google Earth and looked at, when you're coming from the north down the river, the whole ridge, that whole talus slope is a perfect image of the head and trunk of a mammoth or mastodon. It even has a little curl at the end, like the nose of the trunk. And at that nose was where the Anzac infant was buried.
Hmm.
And it's right along the creek. I think it's called the Flathead Creek. I can't remember, that flows into the Shields River there, which flows down into the Yellowstone. And so those people saw that. And so that little slope became
Mhm.
a sacred ritual site.
Mm.
And so often on cave walls, all we saw was the top outline, very
Mhm.
distinctive. And you knew that represented the entire mammoth. They were so familiar with this creature, so familiar with its profile. They just drove the profile and you instantly knew it was so recognizable.
Yeah.
Well, a
So-
lot of
we-
times,
Sorry,
Because-
sorry.
say a lot of times when you see those upper drawings and stuff like that, they're talking about an ascension.
Mm.
They're showing that coming from the earth. So they only do, you get up into
Mhm.
up into Canada, into some of the caves and stuff up there, and you'll see that a lot. And you'll see that there's no legs or anything, everything from the body up. And that's one of the things that they talk about, is that ascension of
Mhm.
that animal.
Ah, it's very
Well,
interesting.
that's logical. That's a logic symbol.
Makes so much more sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Wow. Can we talk about how this is a welcome trend in archaeology and anthropology
Well, it's-
to talk with the elders of the cultures, the descendants of these cultures, and ask for your input? This is now a thing. This is illuminating so much more. Comments on that?
it's
It's
become more.
about time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it's become more and more respectful, and there's an evolution to the whole field of archaeology. And
Yeah.
when we attended the society, the SAA, the Society for American Archaeology, in Albuquerque,
A couple years ago.
yeah, every single presentation began with honoring
Yeah.
the people of the land from where they came. Everybody understood that they have to go back. We have to go back.
Let's
away.
bring the lineage
Yeah,
forward.
exactly. Yeah.
And let's befriend let's be one family on the planet.
So there's a
Yeah.
maturity happening. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
maturity in the field of science that's actually saying, okay, maybe these people knew something. Maybe we need to go back and listen better. And
You
When
know,
you
we
see-
can extend this to the living people of
Yeah.
all the planet. I mean, the old world people, for example, people who live in Czechoslovakia, where the Gravettian culture was in full flower. There's an archaeological site there known as Pavlov, and the hills that are above it have often been likened in their shape and recognized as
Yes.
being mammoths, actually. This is not our own idea. It's not confined to just us here in the New World. Native Americans and people who have come later. No, it's also recognized in the Old World.
Yeah.
And people talk about it in the modern day as well, just as we're talking about it. It's everyone in the world, human beings have the ability to recognize these images. Our brains are very much alike.
And were they finding these mammoth huts? Because now they've found the recreation. I mean, it was in what, Ukraine and
Ukraine
Czechoslovakia,
has
and
a
these
mammoth
like
tusk.
beautiful mammoth huts that were so, I mean, talk about clever use of building materials that are just there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
talk
Wow.
about honoring.
Yuri Klakula, who's going to speak here soon, correct?
Next week, next Sunday.
Next Sunday.
Yeah.
And, well, let us ask Yuri about the Pavlov Hills and
Okay.
what they're purported to be. So it's it's wonderful. I mean, it just shows that we can learn from everyone.
Yeah.
Well, okay, he's an archaeologist, he's a geologist, he's studied the climate of the land bridge. He said you can see artifacts on that Mongolia, Siberian side of the land bridge, the Canadian side of the land bridge, Alaska, Canada. You can see, he feels crossings back and forth.
Yeah, Canada, Russian or something.
Yeah.
He has a term for
Russian
that.
Canada.
Oh,
Yeah.
Russian Canada. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting. And of course, you mentioned Paulette Steves. I don't know if she's here today, but she's certainly on our list, as is Tyler Chase. I want to honor the women doing this, so they're on our guest list.
Yeah.
But Paulette, you pointed out, Gramley, says it's only the attitude of our colonization of our manifest destiny. We wanted this continent to be empty so we could just justify ourselves coming over and taking it over. But to recognize that people have been here for so long might be contrary to our own interests. Maybe that's why archaeologists on this side are not quite as open to this idea of early colonization of the Americas. But you have, as I mentioned, the footprints in White Sands National Park. That's the middle of the country.
Well, but
they didn't just plop down in the middle of the country. They were coming from the edges.
Well, we were all brought up. This is the new world. We were brought up to this is the new world, and all of a sudden,
that was so late.
You're turning it on its heels. We're not. Well, this is not the new world. It's just an extended world, an interconnected world, right?
How do you feel about that, Sam? About how early do you think that people were here in the Americas? What do your traditions say?
Well, our traditions, they talk about the sky world and the sky mother coming here, and there wasn't anyone here until that.
Yeah.
But in that, when you talk about those destiny stories and stuff, and you see a lot of this, coming at the same time. So.
Yeah. It's a continuation.
Well, that's what's been fun about having James and Gramley here as well. We
have to explore. We have to ask the question. I know further evidence is needed, but we have to start accumulating it and ask the question to be open to the idea.
Yeah,
we have to ask.
And it comes back to what
honoring our native brothers and sisters.
And we touched on it even before we began recording today. But that idea that the land bridge is both directions. There's a lot going on here that we haven't recognized in the past. It always was just assumed a one-way bridge, but now we're saying, wait a minute, hold your horses. There's more to this story.
Yeah, we talked about Australia. If they could have colonized it 60 and 70,000 years ago, they had to come by boat to some degree. Boats, it just seems to me, waterways are highways, whether it's frozen or liquid. These are highways,
right,
for people to arrive.
Do we want to take some questions as
yes,
well?
Please.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, James, and thank you.
Anything
Richard.
else you both want to say?
Thank you.
All right. Well, go ahead and raise your hand. You can use the Zoom screen to raise your hand.
By the way, Yuri is going to present evidence of 30 and 40,000 years ago of the crossing of the land bridge. And he's looked at the climate, he's looked at the geology, he's looked at the artifacts, and as Gramley had mentioned in his talk with us, if you look at the Gravettian globalization, if you look at the artifacts of the old world, and then you see some of the same artifacts in the new world, how can we not make connections?
Right.
How can we not say perhaps they came over?
Yeah.
So That's why I was really curious about what's the climate like? What's the geology like? How passable was the land bridge
Mhm.
during the Ice Age? And Yuri's got some interesting data.
That's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we've got to start laying the evidence out
Mhm.
fairly.
Did you want to, oh, Kelly wants to make a comment. Kelly?
Hi,
Hi.
I've really appreciated this. I've been so excited to have like all these people in one room, and
Yeah.
it's been really cool. Like my question is not really about, my question is, I feel like I'm finding things, and it's more of a spiritual question of respect for things that I'm finding and pieces that I'm finding that are carved and, you know, animal shaped, and questionable pieces that seem much older. My question would be like, is that disrespectful to me for me to take them? Like, I've been asking when I go there. I love artifacts. I'm very scientific, but I'm also very spiritual. And
That's a good
I
question.
have this land, and I made a teepee down there and like a little fort and everything, so I could actually even keep them there, because
Yeah.
sometimes I felt like they weren't for me.
Uh-huh. That's a really
That's
good question.
respectful.
When we find artifacts, what do we do?
Yeah.
Sam?
Sam, what do we do?
When I'm walking the fields with a couple of different archaeological groups of stuff that I work with, I'll pick things up, arrowheads and stuff, and look at them. And a lot of times they keep a book with me, make drawings, and then I just leave them there. I return them.
Yes.
One of the things that I tell people is that using or gathering a lot of these pieces, you don't know what the issue and stuff is, why they're there, if they were used for if they were a war piece, or if it was used for a medicine ceremony. And I tell people, I says, once you've looked with a piece and you've had it, there's no problem with you like keeping a hold of it and stuff. But if you move, you should take that back to where you found it and return it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of stories we've heard on Maui of people taking the pieces of coral, or taking artifacts, or taking lava, or taking the beach stone. And then the saying goes, it may not bring you the good luck that you might think. It really wants to be back there with Mother Pele. People sending them back.
But I will say,
in the post office of just deliveries, anonymously coming in of these artifacts. Please redistribute these on the beach.
Yeah.
Or interesting. So
I will say though, I get feelings there, and I will ask if something is for me. And it's almost like sometimes I go to my creek and it's like it feels like a very sacred place, and I want to tell people and I want more information, but at the same time it feels like so special there that I feel like sometimes I'm not supposed to, like it's not for everyone.
That's right.
And that's where I have like a little bit of a problem. Like I got to find my balance, because sometimes I think they do want me to show this. I mean, I'm in Virginia. There's only 7 recognized tribes in Virginia. I think there's 35 that are like, there's 35 and there's only 7 recognized.
I see. Yeah.
So sometimes I have that feeling of like, what am I supposed to do? And they just someone keeps showing them to me.
Yeah.
Photographs,
so it's just kind of like a spiritual journey, but I'm also trying to learn where my line is to get people to take me seriously. Also.
Thank you, Kelly.
One of the things I tell people when you've got a place like that, especially one, water is life. When you've got water running through, I mean, it's bringing life, the lifeblood from other areas through there. So it's a cleansing. And I mean, it's like I said with the journal. I said, a lot of times I tell people, keep a journal with you and, draw pictures of what you see.
That's good.
And I said, and then a couple of years later, just go back and flip through those pictures. And I said, a lot of times you'll see there's a story there that's been hidden from you, but it's not until you put all the pieces together.
and activate the site with
Yeah.
your respect.
I love the
Right.
journaling
Don't
idea. That
desecrate
makes
it.
so much sense.
Honor it. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
We all have
Yeah.
cameras.
Thank you so much.
On
I
our
really
phones.
enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sister Margaret, your mic is on. Were you attempting to share as well? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question for you, Leon. Thank you so much. It's very interesting. Are you familiar with the Cuyamonga experiences?
Oh, yeah. We haven't
Yeah.
gone into it a little bit.
And if so, do you have any artifact that we might use as a posture? Do you have any figures?
When we have a lot of discussions and stuff about it, a lot of it is kept in our mind,
Yeah.
because it's considered one of those transition medicines that when a lot of times when things come through that, it's meant to stay mentally with you, but not necessarily physically with you. A lot of times when you talk about people picking up like a stone or picking up an artifact, and then just something comes right to them or they get a feeling. A lot of that is how that's supposed to be taken care of, because it's like somebody can listen to a song. You have 80 people listen to one song, and you'll have 80 different variances.
Mhm.
So it's how it comes to your mind and your heart, is what it's how you're supposed to stand with it. Let it talk to you.
I see.
Do your people have any ceremony similar?
Yeah.
Do I describe
Yeah,
it?
we just
Or if you can.
don't talk about it.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
It's one of those.
interesting. Okay.
We have a lot of ceremonies and stuff that are kept for specific purposes, and a lot of times when we're doing these ceremonies, we don't talk about the ceremonies, we don't sing the songs until that ceremony.
Got it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Or that
when we
season.
leave the ceremony we don't discuss it, we don't bring up any of those songs, but it's supposed to remain in here. That way when we get to that point and that ceremony needs done, it's here and it's here. And that way we can take care of that ceremony.
Yeah. That really makes so much sense.
Sister Margaret, as a Catholic nun who's done work in Chile and Argentina and down South America, and I want to say you've given such a beautiful talk, Sister Margaret, about looking at the commonality between the spirituality of the indigenous cultures you've worked with and your own Christianity, and finding the correlates between the two. So if you wanted to
One of the
keep
reasons
bridging the cultures, you do a beautiful job of that.
my Mapuche friends who are part of our circle,
Yeah.
they have offered some of their images for us to use.
Yes.
And that's why I was wondering if the North American tribes would do the same.
Yeah.
There is a little, there was a book that was written, and a lot of times when I'm doing programs and stuff within the Catholic Church and the Catholicism, I use this book. It's called The Pipe in Christ, and it has a lot of, and it explains a lot of that through different elders talking. And a lot of times people say, well, that you're considered a sinner. It's like you pray to all these different people. Says no, we pray to one entity, but traditionally, if we believe that God was going to be human, God would be female because they're the givers of life.
There you go.
Oh, yay, thank you.
So,
Goddess
and
is still alive and well.
So when you look at it from some of those different premises, I've sat through some of the, I've been in a number of these world religion conferences and stuff, and I've seen some of these these religions that have been fighting each other for 2,000 years, carrying on the same argument, and And a lot of times you kind of look at it, and if you would look at it from a spirituality based and look at it with your heart, it would diffuse a lot of their arguments that they have.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Sister Margaret. Yeah, good points, both.
Sister Margaret's both a Catholic nun and she's a member of our community with the Cuyamonga Institute for long standing.
Yeah.
And
So it's been a
yeah.
wonderful, yeah. And we have wonderful discussions with her on our podcast. If people would like to check
This is
that
a
out.
wise woman who is also a biologist
Oh, yeah.
in training.
She was a
So-
scientist first. Yeah.
Yeah.
All on the side. Okay.
So you've reached many quarters there, Sister
Yeah.
Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you
So
so much.
I appreciate that. Okay, so let's talk about the goddess. So when you look at the Paleolithic Venus, we call them Venus sculptures, the mother goddess sculptures, how do you interpret that?
Yeah.
What do you see in those Paleo-Indian artifacts or those paleo-cultural artifacts?
Being that women were the givers of life, all of our foundation stories around the world all talk about the first woman.
Yeah.
You know, they all, whether it is an immaculate conception, or it is the sky woman, or it's a woman that the clay was washed down through the creek, and just the clay rolling through the created woman, created the female.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We've
You know,
talked
and
to Roxanne Swensel, who talks about going out to clay sites and blessing the clay, asking Mother Earth, may I use this clay
The
to
native
then take
sculptor.
it back. I mean, everything done with ritual and honor.
Mhm.
So I also want to say something. So I appreciate also that for these cultures, these early cultures, it wasn't necessarily about building big monuments. That came later often. They might erect some stones, but earth was the monument, honoring a simple stone, honoring a body of water, honoring the mountains, honoring the fauna, the flora. That was the monument. That is the temple. Can you speak to that? Because we go around looking for such sophistication in our early cultures, but I'm saying it was the mindset. It was walking so honorably upon the earth.
Right. And a lot of it, you know, when you look at the beginning, you know, is that when you find a lot of these places and you see a lot of the, you know, like the pyramids and all of these huge churches and stuff.
Huge church, yeah.
You know, they were built, you know, for a reason. But in traditional earth religions or earth thinking is that the creator's wherever we are, you know, and if we want to pray, we don't need somebody to go and tell them what our prayer is and then they can pray for us. You know, we're taught that, you know, the creator's wherever we are at any time.
Yes.
And that it's in every plant, it's in every root, every animal. And when we talk about our Thanksgiving address, that's one of the things that we do. You know, we have a Ganeo and a Ganonio, and, you know, doing an opening, which opens that, brings everything in, and, you know, brings all of those plant life, the animals, the birds, the two-legged, the four-legged, the fin ones, you know, bringing everything together, because every time that we lose a species or we lose a plant, we've lost part of ourselves. You know, you look at out west in these places where they're starting to take these dams out, and which then they would put the dams in, they caused, you know, the extinction, you know, of some of these plants.
Right.
Now that they're
Fish.
removing those dams, you know, they're finding some of those plants that had incubated that entire time are starting to come forth.
Yeah.
So we provide the environment, we protect the environment for them.
You know, and it's the same with people, is that you know, when I listen to people say, well, you know, that kid was born evil. And I said, well, you know, we don't believe that. that we believe that, the creator created everybody perfect for them. And so you were created perfect, and, hatred and racism and stuff, that's a learned trait. I mean, you have to learn that, because it's not generally,
In your being from the get-go.
right. It's not in your DNA.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're talking about life, death, and rebirth. We talk a lot about that theme mythically, experientially, it's just symbolically. But so for a plant to come back, for a plant to lay dormant that we may have thought was extinct, and it arises again, given the opportunity, life, death, and rebirth. And the burial practices of today, we've been talking about how our Western burial practices are just crazy,
Oh, that's good.
right? They make no sense in the large. We're rethinking them. Let's put it this way: we are rethinking them. We are
Right.
reassessing them.
That's
We
better.
don't really want to add more toxins to the earth. We don't. We want to return maybe our molecules to Mother Earth to be reborn in some way. Those molecules can be taken up by a living thing. Do you want to speak about the philosophy around death and rebirth for your culture?
Well, we really don't look at it as death and like a rebirth. We look at it as, we're continuing that lifeline.
Yeah.
It's
In
just,
another form. Yeah.
like we'll say, we don't die, we just change worlds.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, like with our funerals and our ceremonies and stuff, you have, when people die, if they don't have children, they're buried in the morning of the third day. If they have children, they're buried afternoon in the third day. They always have a brand new pair of moccasins to take put on with them, and that way, they're starting to a new path. And so I tell people, it's like, we were talking the other day, and I said that it's like the movie Groundhog Day. If you're an animal abuser here, and you die, you're going to come back as being the abused until you get it right.
Mhm.
And so, you watch that movie and you see everything that has happened and everything that he corrected. That's kind of life. When we talk about the medicine wheel and the wheel of life is, when you're going through and what you're doing, that's society. That's how you are, but that's how you need to be. A lot of times you see these big concrete vaults and everything else.
Yeah.
And then all these big mausoleums and stuff. I mean, we have a pine box. We have people that make pine boxes.
Yeah.
And and they're decorated, they're wood burnt, they have all kinds of designs and stuff on them, but they're all made with all wood, no metal in them. They're not nailed together, they're pinned together.
Yeah.
And then then they're lowered into the earth, and then everything dissipates with them.
And
Ready to
I
compost
reconnect.
and find life again
Mhm.
in some way,
Yeah.
whether it's be
Life continues.
supporting the plants around
Life
it.
continues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Well, this for me has been really fascinating to be able to go deep into this understanding, because the unique aspect to what you're doing, Sam, for me at least, is that you're bringing the native voice to the field of archaeology in a fresh and exciting way. That you're doing the recreation of the tools. You're going back and saying, okay, here's what they must have been doing for this to be able to be created, to help reestablish that relationship going back. And especially when we start talking about the Grammy work, and we start talking about that how far back do we go in this part of the world, and that's really a refreshing way of understanding.
Well, there's and there's things with that is some of the pieces and stuff that Mike has been getting tested are coming up later, but it's as they're trying to figure out is now they're getting 28, 29, 30,000 years. I know I run into issues with different archaeologists and anthropologists and stuff They don't like it when I show up to their sites
Yeah.
because I ask questions. But a lot of times I've seen a lot of these guys that, come from some of the Jewish faiths and stuff like that. 10,000 years is a stop. And
Yeah.
I've literally seen them take human remains and it's one of the things me and Tyler were talking about. We interviewed,
Tyler, the filmmaker.
Yeah.
we were talking to curators that were forced to wash bones in bleach, in alcohol,
Oh.
to get rid of the DNA.
I see.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's criminal.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
Because they've got an agenda, you're saying?
Right.
and They
Right.
want to prove that alter the dates that might be told other by
Right.
bones themselves.
yeah.
Right. It's because in their religious beliefs, it states that their religion, human activity and stuff doesn't go past 10,000 years.
Yeah.
That-
Yeah.
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 Wow. I want to ask what advice that you have for us Westerners. What is the most important spiritual lesson that we are missing? And I want to say that I prelude that question by saying this idea of this Gravettian globalization, the Gravettian being one of the latest cultures of the Ice Age, before the interstitial warming period and the climate shifted and humanity shifted, but this enduring, going back tens of thousands of years, this culture with a widespread network, with all the cleverness of using materials that were at hand, with communication, with symbology, with understanding this deep relationship within ourselves, within our community, within the planet, within the cosmos. Beautiful, beautiful understanding. So intriguing. Some of the earliest expressions of the indigenous wisdoms where we have the artifacts and the art and it's accessible. So the idea that this spread all over, which there's good evidence for, from Europe into the Middle East, into Siberia, just this huge spread, a network of cultures that we're sharing. If, as some of you, Gramley and James Harrod and yourself, Sam, and who we're going to talk to, Yuri, the archaeologist coming up, if it could have been there in Siberia, and we talked with Jan Van Eiselstein, sadly passed away too soon, but she was working with the Olchi of the Amur River,
in Siberia.
in Siberia. And she was saying, they talk about the mastodons in their own mythology. There are the mastodons and the mammoths. They were there. They go back that far. Doesn't surprise me. So are they a continuation of that? Did these people come across? I mean, the DNA says the Native Americans were populated a good lineage by Siberia and Mongolia. They were there. At what date? We don't know exactly how early. But if there's this continuation, you know what it means? If it means this same culture was there seeding the Americas at some point and we're there in Europe, it means we have a common indigenous ancestor. It means that we truly are one family. We know that we go back to Africa. We know that that lineage there exists. But to find the threads, to find the cultural, it means I'm resonating with this for a reason that I can share back to the Ice Age. I mean, that's exciting. The same lineage, the same symbology, the same experiences, the same mother cultures,
Right.
this shared mother culture. I mean, that's just like,
Yeah.
oh my God, oh my creator, exciting.
Go ahead.
So I guess,
Sam.
what are the spiritual, and then through the vagaries of history, ours got cut off at the knees, right? Ours
Wow.
got, and I appreciate science now connecting the loop. I appreciate the sciences and what they can do to come full circle and
Mhm.
connect the dots. But what are you look around at the West and you go, what are the key spiritual lessons that we need to relearn and reclaim? Maybe put it that way. We once had it.
One of the biggest things when I'm teaching about decolonization, the first thing is you need to get rid of vanity. You need to get rid of a lot of these things that are causing the issues. If you learn to respect, all life,
Yeah.
whether it's human life, animal life, plant life, trees, whatever, we believe the earth is alive. And people say, oh no, it's just dirt and rock and stuff. And I'm like, okay, it was thousands of dinosaurs and everything else that keep building up to make more of it. But when you're looking, at a lot of the things that we need to do that should be done, it goes right back to, having respect, respecting for everything. And I've had, places where I've spoken stuff and people showed up and protest to call me a witch and everything else.
Really?
And I just kind of laugh at them. And I think that kind of, it makes it really is hard on them, because I don't have a problem with laughing at them. I said, if you think you're going to get me angry I said, nope. I said, you'll find out that, I got a lot more humor than you got anger.
Oh, that's a good, that's
Oh,
a
it's a
great
good
sense.
response.
Yeah.
I won't stoop to that level of anger.
All right.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
want to say also that, and this is two questions. The hunt, we the hunt, and some people say a lot of religion and spirituality came with our dilemma that we must take a life for our own people to live, and so there's a lot of ritual around the hunt and the continuation of the soul of those animals. I've always wanted to hear a native elder speak to that. You mentioned the hut and with that lottles and the stone tools.
Right. I always carry tobacco with me, traditional tobacco Oyankwa, and I give that, and we put it on their nose and stuff for their life breath. But, like with the deer and stuff, we take the heart out. I always take a bite out of the heart and take it and set it up on a high stump, with tobacco. And I've come back, a month later, and it's still there deteriorating. That all the other all falls and innards and everything else is completely gone, devoured by other animals, but that heart is still there, just slowly shrinking. In that aspect is that we're taking a bite out of that heart, and we're taking their spirit, but we're respecting them within us.
Right.
So giving the animals and stuff, the fish, whatever, giving them the most respect, in doing what needs to be done, not going out and killing everything you can just to prove that you're the great hunter.
Right.
But
Purposefully.
we're sustainable hunters, and I talk to game commissions and stuff like that. A lot of times they'll ask me about, because when I go to other states and stuff, the Constitution in Article 6 guarantees me supreme right of the land in the treaty belts. And so I don't have to go, if I go to these other states or whatever, I don't have to buy a hunting license or a fishing license, because it's guaranteed us by the Constitution of the United States. And so a lot of these guys, oh no, that's not. Well, I enjoy arguing with them because I'll get it pushed into court, and I've never lost any.
There you go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tobacco, you mentioned tobacco offering. Why tobacco? Why? And you're an herbalist, so you know the plants. What is special about tobacco?
Our Oyankwa, or our traditional tobacco, isn't like European tobacco. And it is used for like when we're going into ceremonies and stuff, we'll take pinches of it, put it in our cheek or in our gum, to protect us when we're doing healings and doing ceremonies for people. But also giving that, that's part of the lifeblood. We believe that when you're giving tobacco and it mixes with the water, it's producing a new life.
Yeah.
And then animal spirits. What is the relationship to the animal spirits? I just want to prelude by saying what has come to us is a conversation, for example, on the beach on Maui, where we met an obvious elder, Hawaiian elder, had a conversation with him, and he talked to us about the relationship that his family had of long standing with the sharks. And he said, traditionally, the sharks would help us fish. We never ate the shark, we never harmed the shark, but we had this spiritual relationship with the shark. And he was our friend. We'd go out, we'd see the shark, they'd chase fish to us. We would feed the shark some of the fish we caught. So it was the special relationship, I forgot the term. Or we mentioned Australia. We went to TV Island, which is all by a long boat ride, passing saltwater crocs, which we could see in a boat ride for 2 hours. Oh my God, I almost died.
3 hours.
And yeah, I don't do well on boats. Let me just say that, okay? Especially boats that are
Okay.
jostling.
Okay.
But we arrive and then we're welcomed. It's all Aboriginal elders that have this island. They welcome you. They take the tourists out. They smudge you with live eucalyptus,
Mhm.
right? And then they did a dance. And the elder did a dance of the crocodile. And he was assuming, his dance, he was posturing. So he would freeze frame for a second, postures, and it really conveyed the crocodile, the singing, the dancing. I mean,
Yeah,
you
the
felt the
videos.
essence of the crocodile. In the Santa Fe, we'd go to the Pueblo dances
Sure.
and the buffalo dance. They would be dressed in the regalia. They'd be dancing, and it was like they took on the hump of the buffalo. You could see the essence of the buffalo came through. They would posture as a buffalo at moments. And so here, Sister Margaret asked about posture, which is very central to our work. We take the cues as ritual instructions from postures depicted in ancient artwork the world over, going back to the Paleolithic, the Neolithic. And posture makes a difference. Posture conveys a lot. We don't know why, we just know that it works and that it's important. And so it's interesting that to take on the medicine of an animal, the dance, the symbology, the posture, that we can commune in artifacts. You take a bite of the heart of the deer, of the buffalo. Can you talk to us about this relationship with the animal spirits? There's many ways of connecting and activating that, but I'd like to hear it from you.
A lot of times when they talk about spirituality, we look at them being relatives. I'm from the hawk clan, so we look at all hawks and stuff as being sacred, and other birds of prey, and it's like people from the turtle clan, they do the same thing. So they're not going to butcher a turtle and make turtle soup because it's considered one of their relatives. But each one of the clans, each one of the animals, they all bring a different spirit. They all bring a different teaching. So if you're looking at these animals and you're looking at the teachings that they bring to you,
right.
that's giving you a sense of being, and meaning that if somebody says, "Oh, she's as pretty as a bird," or he squawks like a cat, or something like that. You look at a lot of times people will make references to people by animals, and a lot of times you'll ask people and stuff, well, what do you think your spirit animal is? And so people look at that, and that's one of the things that, and it's really familiar that people find that they're always comparing themselves, to somebody, not a Kardashian. I think I'm a horse, so that's, they're putting themselves in a different realm, but they're putting in themselves in a realm that they find, the teachings, the medicine, the way they carry themselves, how that affects them and how it gives them a positive outlook on life. So it's not necessarily like a spirituality, but it's more of a transition, because they're transposing that energy from that animal into them, giving them faith that they can do, what they need to do.
It's a more all-encompassing philosophy of life itself.
Well,
Right.
and paying attention to the clues and the signs around us.
Right.
We've had some interesting encounters with animals as messengers. We were in our work, owl came through, spirit of
Right,
owl came
yeah.
through potently to many, many people.
Right.
And later that night, you heard for the first time in 3 nights running, owls hooting,
Yeah.
which you never had
right,
heard
right,
before.
right,
We went and
right.
recorded it. It was like so extraordinary.
Mhm.
We had a session where somebody was talking about their vision of a hummingbird. We had an open door as we're all going around sharing our visionary experiences. A hummingbird comes through the door, goes right in front of this woman, stays stationary for a moment, looks right at her, and we're just like, and then zips out of the room again. I mean, extraordinary encounters where the animals, birds especially, have always been honored as messengers.
Right.
So how does that work in your opinion? What is that going on in your opinion?
Well,
And I know
it's,
you have many yourself. You've
right.
alluded
And
to
it's a connection. It's a connection that, they talk about, watai. It's a spiritual connection to a bird, plant, medicine. And that connection is omniscient.
Yes.
It already knows everything. You just got to figure out what it's telling you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And be open to it, which is respecting it and then opening
Right.
the pathway for these things to happen.
And that's one of the biggest things is, like when I tell people they're trying to figure something out, and I said, go by whatever comes to you first. I said, your first impression, what you thought at first is usually generally right. And then when you start questioning yourself, that's usually when you make mistakes.
And you're cutting off that flow, you're cutting off that connection. You're saying, I don't want that. Basically, if you doubt it.
Yeah.
Trust, we need to trust. If all the world is sacred, if the creator is everywhere, we can trust that.
Mhm.
We open the flow to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
One of the
Wow.
most, I'll just mention one quick story. One of the most
Wow.
intense and amazing stories is that I've always had this thing that I like to adopt and recover things. Well, if I go into an antique store and I found this pelt of a coyote and this shouldn't be here, so I
Oh.
brought it home. I opened up the car door, stepped outside, and all of a sudden, this huge amount of coyotes start howling as I walk out. I mean, this
remember that.
you couldn't have scripted it in some Hollywood movie because people would think, oh, this is fake. But it was just like the spirit of coyote was so strong, the way that it came forth, and
Yeah.
it was a recognition. Yeah.
And you look at like a lot of times when I'm doing programs, because children haven't been tamed, and you look at how a child draws, something, they're drawing from a first person spirituality, they're drawing from truth. They're not, they
They're
don't
not
know,
filtering it.
they don't know how to fake things. And a
Mhm.
lot of times you'll see that with a lot of these new psychiatric and psychologist programs and stuff are showing that they can read a lot of this stuff that's from children just by seeing how they're drawing and what they're drawing, the colors and stuff that they're using, because somebody that's more at peace, they're going to be using more earth tones. Somebody that's out of balance or has anger, they're going to use brighter colors. So when you look at just the creativity of spirituality, and you talk to an artist and you ask them, how did you learn this? What were you thinking when this came to you?
Doing art in
Yeah.
dreams and getting into that mindset is opening up another channel.
Yeah.
Yep.
Direct from the creator, I think.
Right.
Isn't it?
And it's the same art. It's the same with music. It's the same with poetry.
Mhm.
And people say, well, I've been drawing a blank for so many years, and then this thing came right to me, and it was like, I had to stop and look, says, well, did I hear it someplace else? Or was I just open myself up to the right time, to learn this?
Right.
And we've all fallen into those very deep daydreams in which just something
Knowledge
is
flows.
coming
The
forward.
synchronicity of flow state happens. Exactly.
Yeah. Speaking of postures, I have one other quick story. And if anyone else has an interesting, mysterious moment that they want to ask, go ahead. But here's mine. So we are using artifacts as ritual instructions in our ceremony, which is very akin to ceremonies around the world, right? We feel like we have an indigenous connection to them because we can go back to ancient Europe, Paleolithic Europe. That's our avenue without stepping on other toes. That was what Goodman gave us, the founder of this
Okay.
institute.
Yeah.
And we're looking at an Egyptian artifact. We don't tell people what it is or anything about it, but we're like, the statue is holding this particular posture. Let's do this with some drumming or rattling. So, and then we share. So people around afterwards share. And several people, we get to have Zoom where people are in their own homes.
Yeah.
And we see their settings. And the cats are interesting. The cats always come forward during the sharing. If people have cats, the cats are very active. They're popping in and out of the screen. And so 4 people during this one session say, my cat was particularly active. She is sitting on the chair that I sat on to hold this posture. It was a seated posture. And she's purring loudly. She's in my lap. She's here. They were very excited, but they were very respectful. And there was like they went into trance as well. 4 separate people reported this. Well, then we show the artifact. It had a cat embalmed inside the artifact that the Met Museum could only see through a X-ray.
X-ray, yeah.
And so it was a goddess Bast, right?
Mhm.
Or a relative of
Yeah,
Sekhmet.
Yeah.
And this interesting seated posture. And so even the cats seem to have known, just like your coyote. It's like they're there to come honor that energy. And so the question is part of us, you can walk into a church and there's the incense, there's this voluminous ceiling, rather like the caves, I think, were the first cathedrals. And so much spiritual activity happens in a space. I'm sure this is true of your lodges and where you go in these sacred sites of nature. And there seems to be a collection of activated molecules. A field is set up because we go there, we honor it. We create sacred space through our attention and our respect and our ceremonies and our rituals. So do you think part of it is that the artifacts become activated, that we're an essential part of building these lines of energy, of building these conduits of flow of energy, because our duty is to perform ritual, to come with open hearts? What role do you think humans have in all of this?
Good question.
Well, the energy is always there. It's come, it's being there, it's above us, it's below us, it's all the way around us. And a lot of times when you find things, especially if you're out walking in the woods and stuff, and you may find something that's completely out of its realm, and you look at it and pick it up, and next thing you know, it's just like things are running through you. It's like you can feel a connection. And I hear people say that all the time, like they'll go into a store and they'll be looking at different antiques or looking at different art and stuff, and then you say, oh, well, this speaks to me.
Yeah.
And but a lot of it is that connection, that is the artist taking their time and doing what they need to do in a right way, or are they just doing a bunch of production stuff to make money?
Right.
And a lot of times it's pieces like that that are going to speak to you and give you a whole different outlook on life.
Yeah.
So if you're sitting there and you're looking at a piece of pottery and you pick it up and it's like, whoa, you can feel the energy and stuff coming from it. That's telling you something. That's giving you a connection to that umbilical cord.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that you learn. One of the things that comes, you know, when you look at, you know, things being omniscient, or if you start looking at things holistically, mind, body, soul, and spirit.
Mhm.
If you start looking at things with tunnel vision, you're going to miss so much than, you know, versus, you know, having a panoramic view.
Right.
And we're in charge of our own bandwidth. We can
Right.
choose to open. There's methodologies to open,
Yeah.
or we can choose to close.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been such a delight to
Yeah,
talk with you. I have
absolutely.
many more questions, but Paul's
Yeah.
telling
Well, we
me
can.
I can't wear everybody out, but I could keep going.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank
You're
you.
very welcome.
Thank you so much. And before you do leave, let's have everybody say thank you as well. So not just Laura and I, but thank you for such an interesting and insightful way. And I think an inspiring way for us to maybe to reflect on ourselves and say, how can this impact us? And having that idea of how all of these different aspects are an extension of ourselves. So thank you, Sam.
Yeah, that was a delight.
Yeah.
So
All right.
keep up
Thank
the
you
good
all for
work.
coming.
Yeah.